Here we are at the very beginning, and like most forms of media, it all started with a book. Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei is a series of novels written by Aya Nishitani that began publication in 1986. It tells the story of computer genius Akemi Nakajima, who one day, after getting the utter crap beat out of him by a bully named Hiroyuki Kondo, decides to get revenge by completing a project he was working on, a demon summoning program. He sends a request to have a demon kill Hiroyuki, and the girl to put him up to it, Kyoko Takamizawa. Eventually, his request falls upon the ears of Loki, who mind controls the student body and sicks them on Hiroyuki and Kyoko. At this point, Loki requires female sacrifices as an offering. Akemi uses his literature teacher, Ohara, and Loki proceeds to have sex with her. As this is going on, Yumiko Shirasagi, a new transfer student, stumbles upon the sacrifice. Loki ends up wanting Yumiko as well, but Akemi denies Loki of any more sacrifices. Loki just laughs at him and forcefully summons himself into the real world, going on a killing spree now unchained from the demon summoning program. While this is happening, Yumiko gets injured by a mind-controlled Ohara, and it's revealed that Yumiko is the reincarnation of the goddess Izanami, and as so, gets possessed by her. After attempting to fight Loki, Yumiko and Akemi flee, but Yumiko is fatally wounded in the process, leaving Akemi with no other choice but to go to the tomb of Izanami and have Yumiko revived. Also, it's found out that Akemi is the reincarnation of Izanagi, but that doesn't really become important until the second book. Now, that's just a summarization of a chunk of the first book, and this book went on to get a lot of things, actually. First, it got 2 more books making a trilogy, which, by the way, all except the third one are fully translated online and are an interesting read. Second, there was an OVA made based off of the first book, which is a pretty fun watch, and is absolutely drowning in that 80s aesthetic. It's what's been playing as I've been describing the book, and you can find it on YouTube with subs and all. Animation is nice and fluid, soundtrack is dark and unnerving, and the environments as well as the use of color is absolutely amazing. For a nearly 42-minute watch, I'd say it's a pretty good summarization of the first book, and is a good substitute if you don't want to read 447 pages to get the general story. Just a word of warning though, if you didn't already get the impression, these books are kind of screwed up, and the OVA is no different. This is back when you could show anything and people wouldn't care one bit, so just note that there are some interesting scenes in the OVA. Third, there was a sequel series of 6 books called New Digital Devil Story. These books take place 3 years after the events of Digital Devil Story and mainly follow the adventures of a high schooler and a resistance group bent on stopping the demons from continuing their reign over the human world by finding a way to resurrect Izanami. And that's all I can really tell you, because there is barely anything about these novels besides the blurb I just read to you. And that's a rough translation of the summary for this book on the Japanese Wikipedia page for Digital Devil Saga. Yeah, to say there's a lack of information on what basically started the Megami Tensei franchise is putting it mildly. Fourth and finally, we have video game adaptations. But funny enough, our journey still doesn't end there, because the first Megami Tensei game didn't come from Atlus. It came from Telenet Japan, a developer that got its start in 1983 but has since closed its doors as of 2007. Known simply as Megami Tensei or Megami Tensei Monogatari, this game was released in July of 1987 and was on the MSX series of computers. Yeah, that thing that had the original Metal Gear on it also had the first Megami Tensei on it. As for the game itself, it's a top-down action RPG that kinda reminds me of Tower of Druaga, an old Namco arcade game. You're tasked with traversing the demon world and killing any demons in your way. There's 11 worlds and 160 stages, so there's tons to do, but seeing as I've never played this game, I'm not sure if all of that's fun to do. But that's enough blabbity blab. We're here for this. Released in September of 1987, the torch for Megami Tensei adaptations was handed over to Atlus, a new company that had been around for a year at that point and was ready to make some games. Megami Tensei is truly where the beginning of this series started. It's got the first-person dungeon crawling and turn-based battling that we're all used to. But even still, this is not our destination. because NES games are not my forte, and even the good ones didn't have everything put together as well as it should. So instead, we're going with Kuyaku Megami Tensei, or Megami Tensei The Old Testament, a compilation of Megami Tensei 1 and 2 remade for the Super Famicom in 1995. This will be the version of Megami Tensei we will be looking at. Hope you don't mind too much, and if everything's okay with you, then let's get started already, because this intro is long enough as it is and we still haven't gotten to the game yet. So Megami Tensei is basically Book 3, a digital devil story, before Book 3 was actually made, where after the defeat of Loki and a group trying to summon the demon Seth, Lucifer has entered the fray, and is planning to take over the human world. Lucifer kidnaps Izanami and constructs the Daimakyu, a massive labyrinth filled with demons trapped in the newly revived Loki and Seth to serve as beefed-up obstacles for Akemi and Yumiko. With the demon summoning program and Izanami's leftover magic in their possession, the duo begin their trek through the various segments of Daimakyu, defeating Lucifer's minions, saving Izanami, and finally taking on Lucifer himself. So Megami Tensei is your normal JRPG affair. You explore dungeons and cities in a first-person view, you fight in random battles, and you buy gear as well as level up to increase your stats. But there are some twists in this formula. For starters, the game starts off by giving you 15 stat points to distribute on both Akemi and Yumiko, effectively allowing you to customize the two in any fashion you want. Which is pretty cool, but honestly, dumping all your stat points into vitality and strength for magic is almost always a good idea in these games. Then there's the case of battles. Since this is the olden days, you don't fight multiple enemies in a battle, you just fight one enemy, but you could end up fighting multiple copies of that enemy. I'm not sure what the max is, but I've had battles where there were 8 of one demon, which takes a while when it happens. In battles, you can attack, defend, use skills or magic, and the two big things, use your comp and talk to demons. The comp is a portable computer used to hold and summon demons. Demons that you can get by negotiating with them and getting them to join your side. Demons will only join you if you are at the same or at a higher level than them, and even then, negotiating can go any which way. They can ask for something and then just leave, they can get angry and attack you, they can pull a trick and end up stunning you, or they just flat out won't respond to you. You can't recruit every demon in this game, and you can't recruit 2 of the same demon, but the ones you do can be summoned to aid you in battles. Summoning a demon costs Maka, the currency of the Megami Tensei games. You can have up to 4 demons out at a time, and keeping a demon out with you as you explore drains magnetite with each step. Magnetite is a substance that keeps demons alive in the human world. If you have demons out without any magnetite to sustain them, then they will take damage with each step. Maka, magnetite, and experience is gained after winning battles. Experience isn't shared, so Akemi and Yumiko will receive the same amount of experience for each battle. When you level up, you get a stat point to put into whichever stat you want, much like how you started out. Your demons, on the other hand, don't gain experience or extra skills or anything. What they have when you get them is what they'll have forever. Don't like that? Well, you could take your demons to the Cathedral of Shadows run by the Minister Mido, a recurring character in the series. Here you can fuse 2 demons into a new, better demon. But much like recruiting, you can't fuse demons that are at a higher level than you. The last gameplay feature to point out is the Moon Phase system. This actually started in the Telenet version of Megami Tensei, but basically, different phases of the moon will have different effects. There's conflicting reports on when certain additions were brought to this mechanic, but as a basis, magic that you can use out on the field wears off after a full cycle, and demons are more aggressive and unstable when it's closer to a full moon, with them being fully non-negotiable during a full moon. However, when it's closer to a new moon, they are more docile. This is the basis for all the games to come, and even when it only has the bare essentials, this game is still really fun to play. I've always had a soft spot for the first-person dungeon crawlers, and while this game isn't as convenient as, say, Etrian Odyssey, I still enjoy running through a lot of these dungeons, fighting demons, and racking up the levels. It's especially fun considering that the game gets a bit more open-ended after the first dungeon, letting you go onward to different cities or dungeons while most of the time not having any roadblocks in your way. A big example is when you beat Medusa in BN, the second dungeon of the game. because you realize that this is a flying city and can be driven to the last dungeon where the toughest enemies and some of the best equipment in the game lie. And I kinda miss that in game design. Games that let you go to the final area and are perfectly okay with you getting endgame level gear that makes previous sections of the game a breeze if you can really handle it. Heck, this game lets you run off with no direction so much, I accidentally walked into the boss room where Loki was. Here I was, just exploring the rest of the dungeon, and then he just pops up in my face. It's like, oh, dang man, I didn't even know you were here. I don't even have my demons out yet. Can you give me a second? It's pretty good, but because no one's first attempt is going to be their best, there are a few issues and nitpicks I have with this game, especially as someone who's more used to the mid-2000s Megaten games. Let's start with the biggest one. Some enemies have a move where they can steal a level from you. Yes, drop you down a level by force. And of course, you don't get that level back if you beat the enemy that stole it. No, that level's gone. All the experience you gain to get that level, get it all again. Or restart to your last save file if you haven't made that much progress since your last save. I personally don't like this because it's just tedious. There's no challenge, there's no fun. It's just wasting your time. Speaking of, a big factor of this game is that every boss except the first requires an item to beat them. Even Lucifer requires you to get an item or he will keep fully healing any damage you deal. Now, I don't dislike the idea. In fact, for a majority of the game, as long as you're helping out in the towns you visit, you'll get the item you need. But the 4th dungeon onward, I dislike how it was executed in some areas. Mainly because the game requires you to get 1 or 2 items that are somewhere in the previous areas and also either require a guide or one person in a 1x1 room in the middle of nowhere to tell you the solution. Mazurka Corridor, the 4th dungeon of the game, requires 2 sets of items to progress. The Jewel of Heaven and Ares Necklace, both of which are easy to get, you just need to find Rag, another recurring character in this series who only accepts amethyst in exchange for his wares. Amethyst, by the way, can be found in a nearby room. That's not so bad. But then there's the Silver Relief and the Statue of Latos. Now, you need that previous set to even obtain the Statue of Latos, otherwise you'll take heavy damage and get kicked out of the room. This is the item that you need to fight the boss Hecate, as she is normally invisible without it. The Silver Relief, on the other hand, is required to reveal her hidden boss room. You find this by going through a bit of a maze, ending up in a desolate part of the dungeon, find a part of the dungeon where it's pitch black, find the hidden entrance to a hideout, and you'll find Gaia, who actually stole the Silver Relief in an attempt to kill Hecate. To get it, however, you need to give them all of your Maka, which if you're like me, you are probably saving it up for gear. If not, then you give them your pocket change and you get the item, no problem. But if you were in my predicament, and don't want to grind all that Maka back, you say no, buy your stuff, and then walk all the way back to them. It just artificially lengthens the game and makes playing through the rest of the game a slog. If anyone isn't bothered by this, then I'm glad you can enjoy this game in its entirety. But for me, once I get to Mazurka Corridor, the game's pacing goes downhill for me. Even little nitpicks like the fact that there's only 1 healing item for a majority of the game and you can only get it from chests and battles don't bother me as much as those 2 big issues, which, by the way, the fetch quest thing, while it isn't centered around bosses beyond this game, it stops being stupid after Megami Tensei 2. The level draining thing, on the other hand, doesn't go away until Persona 2. Just pointing that out now so I don't need to bog down the next few videos with similar complaints. Man, if there is something this franchise always gets down, it's the music. Whether it's upbeat and catchy like Mikan and Bien, or threatening and mood-setting like Daedalus or the boss battle theme, these games always have such amazing music. And even though these tracks are short, I love listening to a bunch of them. My favorites include the battle theme, Valhalla, The shop theme and Lucifer's theme. Megami Tensei 1 is an alright game. It's got issues and obviously isn't as polished as the games that come after it, but you know, that's to be expected. It's still a quality game on its own that's still just as fun as current SMT titles, though as stated earlier, a lot of the luxuries and conveniences aren't present this early in the franchise's life. But I would still recommend this game to any SMT fan or RPG nut that's curious about how the franchise got its start. Just be sure to play the SNES version as it's more visually pleasing, sounds better, and is put together a lot better. Anyways, I believe that's it for this video. Next time we'll be talking about Megami Tensei 2, which not only has its own story away from the novels, but basically lays down the framework for what will eventually become Shin Megami Tensei. Until then, thank you guys so much for watching, be safe out there, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Also, for those of you who are wondering, Megami Tensei translates to Goddess Reincarnation and is referring to Yumiko and Izanami's whole situation. As for Shin Megami Tensei, that roughly translates to True Goddess Reincarnation, and that refers to the fact that for a while, the heroine in these games would be reincarnated or be the reincarnation of a normal person or a deity. Also, it just sounds cool.